Welcome to the Explainer. Okay, if you're getting ready for the AWS Cloud Practitioner exam, you already know that IAM is a huge topic. But let's be real, some parts are way more important and pop up on the exam more often. Today, we're zeroing in on those advanced IAM security principles. These aren't just for passing the test, they're what you'll use every day to build actually secure stuff in the cloud.
All right, let's kick things off with a problem that literally every single person working in the cloud has to deal with. How do you give someone access to AWS without, just handing over the permit keys to the entire kingdom? That's kind of like giving out a house key that never, ever expires. You just know there's got to be a smarter, safer way to do it, right?
So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the most basic choice you have to make in IAM, users or roles. Then we'll dive into why temporary credentials are such a big deal for your security. From there, it's all about adding an extra lock on the door with multi-factor authentication. And once someone's inside, how do we make sure they don't have too much power? That's the principle of least privilege. And to wrap it all up, we'll talk about why this whole security thing is a journey, not a destination.
Okay, first things first. We've got to break down the two main ways you can grant access in AWS. And believe me, getting this distinction right, it's the foundation for your entire security setup.
And this really lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you've got IAM users. They have long-term, static credentials. Think passwords and access keys that don't change. That is a massive security risk if they get compromised. But on the other side, we have IAM Roles. They use temporary credentials that automatically rotate. This is the modern, secure way to do things. So for the exam, and for real life, just burn this into your brain. Roles are the best practice. You should always choose roles over users when you can.
All right, so if roles are the way to go, let's really get into how they actually work. You're about to see why these temporary credentials are a complete game changer for cloud security. Okay, so here's the key idea. A role isn't permanently stocked to one person or one thing. I like to think of it like a hat. A trusted entity, say an EC2 instance, or maybe a developer, or even another AWS service, can temporarily put on this hat to get a very specific set of permissions. And when they're finished with their task, they just take the hat off and poof, that temporary access is gone.
And this is where you really see the benefits stack up. When you use roles, you are literally pulling out the single biggest security risk from your code and your workflows, those permanent hard-coded keys. It's a huge win. Plus, it makes it way easier to enforce that least privilege idea we'll talk about soon, and it gives you this crystal clear audit trail of who did what and when.
Honestly, in any well-designed AWS setup, you're going to see roles everywhere. The classic example, the one you'll see all the time, is an EC2 instance that needs to read a file from an S3 bucket. Instead of sticking secret keys right onto that instance, which is a big no-no, you just assign it a role. But they're also used for things like letting people from your company's directory sign in, or even letting one of your AWS accounts talk to another one securely. Okay, so we've decided roles are our main way of granting access. Awesome. But how do we protect the people or services that are allowed to use those roles? Well, that's where multi-factor authentication, or MFA, steps in. MFA is all about adding another layer of security. It works by making you prove who you are in two different ways. The first factor is something you know, like your password. But the second factor is something you have, like that little 6-digit code that pops up on your phone app. The magic here is that even if a hacker steals your password, they're still stuck. Without that code from your phone, they can't get in. Now listen up, because this is a big one. For the exam, and frankly, just for being a responsible human in the cloud, this is non-negotiable. You have to enable MFA on your AWS root account, and for all your users. If you only remember one security tip from this whole explainer, let it be this one. Putting MFA on your root account is the single most important critical thing you can do to lock down your AWS account. All right, so we've securely let someone in the front door by having them use a role with MFA. Great. But now that they're inside the house, we need to be very, very specific about which rooms they can go into and what they can do. And that brings us to this beautiful concept, the principle of least privilege. This quote from the AWS docs just nails it. The whole idea is making sure people have just enough permission to do their job, but not one single bit more. It's not about being mean and blocking people. It's about being precise and giving just the right amount of access needed for a specific task. And that's it. So, in simple terms, just grant the absolute minimum permissions required. Think of this as your North Star whenever you're building an IAM policy.
You always start with nothing and only add the specific permissions you can prove are needed. Why? Because this simple habit dramatically shrinks what a bad guy could do if they ever got a hold of those credentials. It limits the blast radius of an attack. But here's the thing about least privilege. It's not a set it and forget it kind of deal. It's a journey. It's a continuous cycle of making things better, tighter, and more secure over time.
Yeah, this image really shows what I mean. Least privilege isn't some destination you arrive at. It's this continuous loop of refinement. You're always in this cycle. You set some permissions, you check to see what's actually getting used, and then you tighten things up. So let's walk through that cycle. Step 1, you set permissions. Maybe you start with a slightly broader AWS managed policy just to get things up and running. Step 2, you verify access. You use amazing tools like IAM Access Analyzer to see what permissions are actually being used. Then, step 3, you refine the policies. You take that data and you create a new custom policy that only has the permissions you need, and you get rid of all the extra stuff. And then you start the whole cycle over again.
Okay, speaking of roles and permissions, there's one very specific, kind of quirky technical detail that you absolutely have to know for the exam. A lot of people get tripped up by this one, so lean in.
When an identity assumes a role and then uses that role's permissions to assume a second role, it's called role chaining. And this is the key exam tip. When you chain roles like this, the session is hard capped at exactly 1 hour. You cannot increase it. Remember that number. Role chaining equals a 1-hour maximum session.
All right, let's wrap this up with the key takeaways for the exam, the stuff you absolutely have to know. Number 1, prefer IAM roles with their temporary credentials over IAM users with their static keys, every time. Number 2, protect everything with multi-factor authentication, especially that root user. Number 3, live by the principle of least privilege. Only grant the minimum permissions needed. And number 4, remember that 1-hour session limit for role chaining. These are really the 4 pillars of good IAM security.
And look, this isn't just about memorizing facts to pass a test. This is about how you actually go and build secure things in the real world. So now that you know these best practices, which one are you going to implement first in your own AWS environment? Seriously, what's one thing you can do today? Is it finally turning on MFA for your root account? Or maybe picking one important role and starting to review its permissions? The whole journey to security starts with that first step.